My husband stood at the head of the mahogany table, demanding I apologize to his family for a betrayal I never committed. He thought this public humiliation was his victory lap. He had no idea that in exactly 5 minutes, the spouse of his mistress would walk through those doors, hand me a check for $100 million, and burn his perfect little world to the ground. My name is Brianna Hart. At 34 years old, I have spent the last decade working as a senior internal data investigator for Lakefront Dynamics in Providence, Rhode Island. My job is to find the digital fingerprints people think they have wiped clean. I locate the deleted emails, the hidden assets, and the secrets buried under layers of encryption. I deal in absolute facts. Tonight. However, the fact I needed to present was not on a spreadsheet, but sitting right across from me at the mahogany dining table. The air in the Hart family estate in Newport always tasted of old salt and older money. It was a house built on silence and the unspoken rule that appearance mattered more than morality. We were halfway through the main course when my husband, Ethan, shattered that silence. He snatched my phone off the table with a violence that made the crystal wine glasses tremble. "Who is he?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising to a theatrical shout that echoed off the high ceilings. He shoved the screen toward his mother. "Look at this. She is getting messages from men at 8 in the evening on a holiday weekend." It was a generic holiday greeting from a junior analyst at my firm, sent to the entire department. But facts did not matter to Ethan tonight. He needed a show. He needed to be the victim. "It is a work notification." "Ethan," I said, my voice steady. I did not reach for the phone. I kept my hands folded in my lap, observing him like a subject in an interrogation room. "Don't lie to me," Ethan roared. He paced around the table, playing to his audience. His mother, father, and the few close friends invited for the dinner watched with rapt attention. "You have been distant for 3 weeks. You hide your screen. You are cheating on me, Brianna, in my house, disrespecting my family." He stopped directly behind my chair. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Kneel," he hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you want to stay a Hart, you will get on your knees right now and apologize for embarrassing me. You will beg for forgiveness to keep your place in this family." The room went dead silent. His mother took a sip of wine, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. They were waiting for me to break. They expected the tears, the denial, the desperate pleading that usually followed Ethan's outbursts. I stood up. I did not push my chair back aggressively. I moved with the precision of a surgeon. "You are right. Ethan," I said. The room seemed to exhale, thinking I was conceding. "We should not have secrets. This family deserves to know exactly what has been happening." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a silver USB drive. It was small, cold, and heavy with ruin. I placed it on the table with a deliberate click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowing. "If you want the truth," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "I will give you the truth." I walked to the massive smart television mounted above the fireplace. The HDMI port was easily accessible. I plugged the drive in. The screen flickered from the ambient art mode to a stark, high-definition video file. It was not a text message. It was footage from the interior of a luxury suite at the Inner Harbor Hotel. The timestamp in the corner read 2 weeks ago. On the screen, Ethan was laughing. He looked relaxed, completely different from the tense, angry man standing behind me. He was unbuttoning his shirt. And then, a woman walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe that slipped off her shoulders as she wrapped her arms around his neck. The woman was not a stranger. I turned back to the table. Ethan stood frozen, his face draining of color until he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman in the video turned her face to the camera for a split second, smiling that perfect, practiced smile. It was the same smile sitting 3 chairs down from me, Marla, Ethan's mother, whispered, the glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Marla Wynne, the family's golden girl, the woman my mother-in-law had always claimed was the ideal wife, sat frozen. Her hand was halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. On the screen, her voice was crystal clear. He is never going to know. Is he the video, Marla asked. He is too stupid to look. The video, Ethan replied, pulling her close. I pressed pause. The image of them entangled froze on the screen, looming over the dinner party. I can explain, Marla stammered, her voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. She looked at Ethan, then at me, her chest heaving as she struggled to breathe. It isn't what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a blade, and I have 6 months of footage just like it. The silence in the dining room was heavy, but the noise in my head was a replay of the last 6 months. I did not get here by accident. I got here because I noticed the things that everyone else was too polite, or too stupid, to see. It started with a scent. It was a specific mix of sandalwood and expensive jasmine that Marla Wynne wore like a second skin. I smelled it on the passenger seat of Ethan's car in March. Then, I smelled it on the collar of his trench coat in April, right after he returned from a supposed business conference in Boston. You are imagining things, Brianna, Ethan had told me back then, laughing as he poured himself a scotch. Marla is practically family. She probably hugged me hello at the club. You really need to stop being so insecure. He said the word insecure like it was a disease, but I was not insecure. I was observant. I went to the security logs for our house. We had a state-of-the-art system that Ethan bragged about constantly, yet I found a recurring anomaly. Every Tuesday afternoon, when I was at the office and Marla came over to supposedly borrow books from our library or drop off gifts for his mother, the cameras in the hallway and the study went offline. It was never a random amount of time. It was exactly 47 minutes. Every single time. The Wi-Fi is spotty in the West Wing. Ethan had explained when I casually mentioned the glitch over breakfast one morning. He did not even look up from his tablet. I will have the technicians look at it next month. Don't obsess over it. It just seems strange that it happens so consistently. I had pressed testing the waters. Ethan had looked at me then, that arrogant smirk playing on his lips. I know how to manage my house. Brianna. I never get caught unprepared because I understand systems, I understand the law, and I understand people. Trust me. He truly believed he was untouchable. He thought that because he was a heart, the world would bend around his lies. That night, I waited until he was asleep. I took his iPad down to my home office. He had deleted the photos, of course. He had cleared the messages. But Ethan was a businessman, not a data analyst. He did not understand that when you sync devices across a shared cloud ecosystem, the thumbnail cache often lingers long after the original file is destroyed. I found them. Photos of dinner receipts for 2. A calendar entry marked M that coincided perfectly with the camera outages. And then, a voice memo he had recorded, presumably to send to her, but which had failed to upload initially, leaving a ghost of the file behind. I created a hidden folder on my encrypted drive and named it Exit Plan. I did not scream. I did not throw a vase against the wall. If I had confronted him then, the Hart family machine would have crushed me. They would have painted me as the jealous, unstable wife. They would have gaslit me until I questioned my own sanity. Instead, I became a ghost in my own marriage. I opened a separate bank account at a credit union in a different county. Every week, I transferred small, irregular amounts, $300 here, $150 there, amounts that would not trigger a spending alert on our joint financial overview. I hired a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset litigation, saving his contact in my phone simply as P.D. I had one rule for myself: no crimes, no slashing tires, no physical attacks. I needed a paper trail so clean and so devastating that no amount of Hart family money could bury it. But as I dug deeper into the exit plan folder, analyzing the patterns of their meetings, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was not just an affair. Marla was asking him questions in their texts, questions about his access to the family trust, about authorization codes for the firm, and about regulatory loopholes. I want to understand your world, Ethan. Marla had texted him. I just want to know how it works. It makes you so sexy when you talk about the offshore accounts. I can show you, he had replied. I can show you everything. I realized then that I was not just looking at a cheating husband. I was looking at a leak. Marla Wynne was not just sleeping with my husband. She was mining him for information. She was not looking at him with love. She was looking at him like a locksmith looks at a safe she is about to crack. And Ethan, in his arrogance, had handed her the combination. I pulled the rideshare receipts from the archived trash folder of Ethan's email. He was careless with the digital debris of his life because he assumed I would never look. I filtered the results by location. There was a pattern. Every second Tuesday. He took a premium ride to the financial district in Boston. The destination was always the same: 100 Federal Street. I ran a tenant search on the address. It was a skyscraper, but the 24th floor was leased entirely to one entity, Calder Meridian Partners. My breath hitched. Ethan worshipped Calder Meridian. He spoke about their aggressive acquisition strategies at dinner parties like he was discussing sports stats. He idolized the man who built it, Grant Calder. I opened a new tab and typed Marla Wynne into the search bar, but this time I added marriage license in Suffolk County. The record appeared in less than 3 seconds. Marla Wynne was not single, nor was she divorced, as she had vaguely implied to my mother-in-law. She was currently married. Her legal name was Marla Calder. My husband was sleeping with the wife of Grant Calder. You represent a suicidally stupid risk. Ethan, I whispered to the empty room. Ethan was not just cheating, he was poaching from a predator. Grant Calder was known in the industry for destroying companies that crossed him. If he found out a mid-level executive like Ethan was sleeping with his wife, he would not just sue, he would obliterate the entire Hart family legacy. But then I found the email that changed my fear into cold terror. It was a forwarded message in a buried thread between Ethan and Marla. The subject line was simply, templates. There was no text in the body, just an attachment. I opened the file. It was a high-resolution scan of a signature. It was Grant Calder's signature. Below it was a second image, a document with the signature already pasted onto the authorization line. It looked perfect. It looked legal. Signatures attached. The previous email in the chain read, "Use the template for the transfer." My stomach dropped. I switched windows to the Hart family joint checking account. I searched for consulting. There were 5 outgoing wire transfers in the last 5 months, each for $12,500. The recipient was not a firm I recognized. It was listed as Seaglass Harbor Limited Liability Company. I ran a corporate entity search on Seaglass Harbor. It was registered in Delaware to a registered agent, a common tactic to hide ownership. But I dug deeper into the filing metadata, looking for the billing contact. There it was. M. Wynne. Marla was billing my husband for consulting fees, and he was paying her out of our joint funds. But the signature template suggested something far worse. They were not just moving Ethan's money. They were practicing to move Grant Calder's money. I pushed my chair back from the desk. The room felt suddenly cold. This was no longer just a domestic dispute. This was federal wire fraud. This was identity theft. If I stayed silent, I was an accomplice. If I signed the joint tax returns next year, I would be liable. I need to get out, I said, my voice shaking. I need to get out before the FBI knocks on the door. I looked at the clock. It was 2 in the morning. I had 4 hours before Ethan woke up for his morning run. I formatted 3 USB drives. On the first drive, I put the video of the affair and the basic text messages. This was for the family dinner. It was the emotional distraction, the smoke bomb I would throw to confuse them. On the second drive, I put the financial logs, the rideshare receipts, and the connection to Seaglass Harbor. This was for my lawyer. On the third drive, I put everything, the signature templates, the metadata, the emails discussing the transfers. I encrypted this drive with a 20-character password. I pulled up an encrypted messaging app and found the contact for a friend who worked in forensic accounting. I typed a single message. If I miss our check-in tomorrow at 9 o'clock, send the package I just emailed you to the district attorney. I sealed the third drive in an envelope and taped it to the underside of my desk drawer. Then I picked up the first USB, the one that would end my marriage, and slipped it into my purse. I was ready for dinner. The silence that followed the video was not peaceful. It was the suffocating, heavy silence of a bomb that had detonated but left the building standing in a twisted, unrecognizable shape. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was the first to move. She dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin, her lips stretching into a grotesque, wavering smile. It was a reflex. In the Hart household, you smiled over cracks in the foundation until the roof collapsed on your head. Well, Eleanor said, her voice brittle, I am sure there is a reasonable explanation for this. Technology can be manipulated. Can't it? Perhaps we should all take a breath and have some dessert. Turn it off, Richard. My father-in-law slammed his hand onto the table. The silverware jumped. He was not looking at his son with disappointment. He was looking at the television screen with disgust. Turn that damn thing off immediately. Brianna, you have made your point. You have embarrassed us enough. It was always about them. It was always about their embarrassment, never my betrayal. Ethan seemed to snap out of his paralysis. The arrogance that had fueled his demand for my apology 10 minutes ago vanished. In its place was a frantic, sweating desperation. He rounded the table, reaching for my arm, but stopped just short of touching me when I turned my cold gaze upon him. "Bree, baby," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Please, let's not do this here. Let's go to the library. Just you and me. We can talk about this. I can explain. I was drunk. It meant nothing. Sit down." "Ethan," I said. I did not shout. I did not cry. My voice was as flat and hard as the marble fireplace behind me. "Brianna, please," he begged, his eyes darting to his parents. "You are upset. You are not thinking clearly. Let's just go to the other room. I am thinking more clearly than I have in 5 years," I replied. I did not turn off the television. Instead, I clicked the remote again. The video of the hotel room vanished, replaced by a simple audio waveform on the screen. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room again, but this time it was not the sound of a lover. It was the sound of a conspirator. "She is clueless." "Marla," the recorded voice of my husband said, "I told her it is for tax optimization. She trusts me. Just need her to sign that paper, and the assets transfer to the LLC. Once she signs, we are free. I will have the capital we need." I paused the recording. The confusion around the table was palpable. Eleanor looked at Richard. Richard looked at Ethan. They understood adultery, but they did not understand this. What paper Richard asked, his voice low. The paper Ethan put in front of me 3 days ago. I answered, looking directly at my husband. The one he said was a routine update for our joint filing status. But it wasn't. I took a breath, letting the truth settle in my chest. My mother left me a trust fund. I told the room. The ocean view. Trust. It locks until I am 35, or until I sign a specific waiver to release the principal for marital investment. It is the only thing my mother ensured Ethan could not touch. I looked at Ethan. He was pale, his hands trembling at his sides. "You always told me I was bad with numbers, Ethan. You told me to just sign where the sticky note was. You said, 'Let me handle it, babe. You don't want the stress.' You were not trying to save me from stress. You were trying to steal my inheritance." "That is not true," Ethan shouted, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "I was trying to invest it for us. For our future, for your future." I corrected him. "With her—" I gestured to Marla. She was still sitting at the table, but she looked sick. Her skin had turned a gray, ashy color. She was not looking at Ethan. She was staring at the table, her hands gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles were white. "You thought I was preparing to divorce you just because of an affair," I asked Ethan softly. The question hung in the air. "You thought I was just a heartbroken wife," I continued. "But I am an investigator, Ethan, and I know you did not just break my heart. You tried to break my bank account. You tried to commit fraud." The Hart family stared at me. For the first time, they did not see the quiet girl from Providence who was lucky to marry into their dynasty. They saw a woman holding a detonator. They realized they were watching a movie they had lost control of a long time ago. I glanced at Marla again. She was shaking. It was a violent, rhythmic shivering. Marla whispered, "I need to leave." "Sit down." "Marla," Richard barked. Marla flinched. She looked up, and her eyes met mine. There was panic there, but it was not the panic of a woman caught sleeping with a married man. It was the terror of a woman who knew that by exposing this fraud, I had just lit a flare in the dark, signaling someone far more dangerous than the Harts. She was not afraid of me. She was afraid of who was coming next. I did not give them time to recover from the shock of the audio recording. I treated the dining room table like a conference room at Lakefront Dynamics during a fraud audit. I tapped the remote again, and the screen shifted to a timeline I had constructed. It was a forensic map of their betrayal. On November 14th, you withdrew $12,500 from our joint savings, I said, pointing to the date on the screen. You labeled it as a contractor payment for roof repairs on the guest house. There were no repairs. That money went directly to Seaglass Harbor, LLC. 3 hours later, a flight was booked to the Cayman Islands in Marla's name using a corporate card linked to that same LLC. I swiped to the next slide. It showed a side-by-side comparison of signatures. This is the incorporation document for Seaglass Harbor. The signature looks like yours, Ethan. But the metadata shows the document was created on a computer registered to Marla. You were not just hiding money. You were building a shell company to launder it. "You are making this up," Ethan shouted. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the china. "You have been spying on me. That is illegal surveillance. I will have you arrested for invasion of privacy." I looked at him with zero emotion. "I did not plant bugs, Ethan. I did not hack your private server. All of this came from the iPad you left on the kitchen counter, the one logged into our shared family cloud account. You synced your entire life to a device you used to play Sudoku while I cooked dinner. I did not have to break in. You left the door wide open. Richard, my father-in-law, was already on his phone. His face was purple with rage. He had the family attorney, a man named Sterling, on speakerphone. She is showing us bank records. Sterling! Richard barked into the phone. She claims to have recordings. Sterling's voice crackled through the speaker, smooth and menacing. Brianna, listen to me very carefully. If you disseminate any private financial information or defamatory recordings, we will sue you into oblivion. You will be buried under so much litigation you will never work in this state again. Cease and desist immediately. I let him finish. I wanted them to feel powerful one last time before I took it away. I have not disseminated anything to the public. Sterling, I said, leaning toward the phone. I have simply preserved evidence to protect my own financial liability. And I have already filed a copy of everything with my own counsel. Your counsel is irrelevant. Sterling sneered. We will crush. Actually, I interrupted him. My counsel found something interesting about the Articles of Organization for Seaglass Harbor LLC. The registered agent is not Ethan. It is not Marla. It is a law firm. I paused for 2 seconds to let the dread settle in. It is your firm, Sterling, I said. You helped them set it up. You are not just the family lawyer. You are a co-conspirator in spousal fraud. The line went dead. Sterling had hung up. Richard looked at the phone in his hand as if it had turned into a snake. The silence in the room was absolute. They realized the safety net they always relied on their lawyers, their connections. Their money had just been cut. Marla let out a sob. It was a wet, pathetic sound. He made me do it, she cried, looking at Richard and Eleanor, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Ethan said it was the only way. He said you guys controlled all the money and he needed his own capital. I was just trying to help him. Stop it, I said. I clicked the remote one last time. A text message thread appeared on the giant screen. Ethan is terrified. Marla's text bubble read. He thinks his dad checks the ledgers. The reply was from Marla again, answering herself in a stream of consciousness. But he will do it. He trusts me more than he trusts his boring wife. I can get him to sign anything. Marla gasped. She stared at her own words, magnified in high definition. The narrative of the innocent victim crumbled instantly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I placed it gently on the table next to the centerpiece of white lilies. This is a draft for a temporary protective order, I said. It outlines the financial abuse, the adultery, and the potential for intimidation. My lawyer is standing by to file it with the court first thing tomorrow morning. Ethan looked at the envelope, and then he looked at me. His face changed. The desperation was gone, replaced by a cold, ugly sneer. The mask of the charming husband finally fell off completely, revealing the narcissist underneath. You think you are smart, Ethan hissed, stepping toward me. You think a few files make you safe. You are nothing without me. You are a nobody from Providence. I will destroy you. I will make sure you never. He lunged forward, just an inch, testing me, trying to make me flinch. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground. Save the threats for the judge. Ethan, I said, my voice steady and low. Tonight. I do not need anyone in this room to believe me. I do not care about your apologies or your explanations. I just need the truth to exist. And now, it does. I drove out of Newport with the gas pedal pressed all the way to the floor mat. The grand iron gates of the Hart estate faded into the rearview mirror, swallowing the toxic silence I had left behind. I did not go to a friend's house. I did not go to my parents'. I went to where no one would look for a Hart, a generic, mid-range hotel next to T.F. Green Airport. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was perfect. I locked the deadbolt and engaged the security latch. My phone had been vibrating non-stop since I crossed the Pell Bridge. First, it was Ethan. 10 missed calls. Then came the unknown numbers. Likely his friends or private investigators he had panic hired. Then, a notification popped up from my email. It was flagged as urgent from Sterling, the family lawyer. Ms. Hart. The subject line read, "We must meet immediately to discuss a settlement structure. Please do not act rashly." I deleted it without opening the body of the message. Then came a text. It was from a number I did not have saved, but I knew the voice immediately. Please. The text read, "Don't make this big. He will lose everything. You don't know what you are doing." It was Marla. She was not worried about my marriage. She was worried about her lifestyle. I typed back 2 words. He chose. I blocked the number and threw the phone onto the bed. I needed to focus. I opened my laptop and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi through a VPN. As soon as I logged into my private cloud server, a red banner flashed across the screen. Security Alert 12 failed login attempts detected from IP address in Newport, Rhode Island. They were trying to get in. Ethan, or perhaps Sterling, was trying to brute force my password to delete the folder named Exit Plan. They were desperate. You are going to have to do better than that. Ethan, I whispered to the screen. I immediately changed the master password to a random string of 30 characters. Then, I activated a dead man's switch protocol. I keyed in a command that would automatically send the encryption key for the entire evidence folder to 3 major news outlets and the state attorney general if I did not log in and reset the timer every 24 hours. I was safe. The data was safe. Then, a new email arrived. It did not go to my spam folder, which meant the sender knew how to bypass filters. The sender name was blank. The subject line was empty. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I clicked open. There was no greeting, just one sentence in plain text. You are holding proof of a theft bigger than you think. Attached was a single PDF file. My heart hammered against my ribs as I downloaded it. It was a spreadsheet comparing 2 documents. On the left was the fake signature template I had found in Ethan's email, the one of Grant Calder. On the right was a transaction record from a private equity transfer dated 3 months ago. The signature was identical, but it was the numbers that made the room spin. Ethan and Marla were not just skimming a few $1,000s for consulting fees. The document showed a transfer of ownership for a block of securities valued at $112 million. I sat back in the cheap hotel chair, my mouth dry. Oh my God. I breathed out. They didn't just steal from him, they liquidated him. I realized then why Marla had looked so terrified at dinner. It was not because of the affair. It was because she and Ethan had forged her husband's signature to move a fortune out of his control. This was grand larceny. This was federal prison time. And I was the only one who had the original metadata to prove they did it. I was no longer just a scorned wife holding leverage for a divorce settlement. I was a witness to a massive financial crime. I was a loose end. I closed the laptop and stared at the door, half expecting it to be kicked in. But the fear did not paralyze me. It sharpened me. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's personal cell number. It was 3 a.m, but he picked up on the second ring. "Brianna," he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Are you safe? I am at the airport hotel," I said, my voice steady. "Do not hang up. I need you to draft 2 things for 8 o'clock this morning. First, the divorce filing citing adultery and financial misconduct. And the second," he asked, "a formal whistleblower submission to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Financial Crimes Division." I said, "I am not just leaving him. Paul, I am burning the whole operation down." The morning sun hit the exposed brick walls of Paul's office in downtown Providence, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a stark contrast to the velvet-draped suffocation of the Hart estate. Paul's office was small, practical, and smelled of cheap coffee and hard work. There were no mahogany tables here, just a scratched metal desk covered in legal pads. Paul pushed his glasses up his nose, staring at the printouts I had brought. He had been silent for 10 minutes. "Brianna," Paul said finally, his voice low, "if these metadata logs are accurate, we are not talking about a divorce settlement anymore. We are talking about RICO charges. We are talking about conspiracy to commit wire fraud. This is heavy." "I know," I said, gripping my paper cup of coffee. "I just wanted to leave him. Paul, I didn't want to be a whistleblower." "You are not a whistleblower," Paul corrected me, looking up with grim seriousness. "You are a liability. If Ethan or his father realize you have the key to a federal indictment, they will come for you with everything they have." Before I could answer, there was a sharp rap on the frosted glass of the office door. Paul frowned. We had not scheduled any other appointments. The door opened before Paul could say a word. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with military precision. He did not look like the lawyers Paul usually dealt with. He looked like a shark that had learned to walk on land. He was followed immediately by a young woman holding a tablet and a burly man who scanned the room with the eyes of a former cop. I stopped breathing. I knew that face from business magazines. I knew that face from the terrifying signature template on my husband's computer. It was Grant Calder. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My instinct was to run. I thought he was here to destroy me for exposing his wife. I thought I was about to be served with a lawsuit that would end my life. Mr. Calder, Paul said, standing up slowly, placing himself between me and the door. You can't just barge in here. My client has rights. Grant Calder did not look at Paul. He looked directly at me. His eyes were a startling, icy blue, and they held no anger. They held the terrifying calm of a man who had already calculated the outcome of the interaction. Sit down, Ms. Hart, Grant said. His voice was smooth, deep, and utterly commanding. I didn't publish anything, I stammered, my hands shaking. I only secured the files to protect myself. Grant signaled to the man behind him, who placed a heavy, thick file box onto Paul's desk with a dull thud. You are under the impression that you are my enemy, Grant said, unbuttoning his suit jacket and taking the seat opposite me. You are wrong. You are not my target, Ms. Hart. You are my witness. I blinked, confusion warring with fear. Witness, I have been tracking my wife's spending for 8 months, Grant said. He spoke about his wife like he was discussing a failing stock portfolio. I knew money was bleeding out of my private accounts. I knew it was being funneled through a series of shell companies, but I could not see where it was landing. My investigators hit a wall every time the money crossed into the Seaglass network. He tapped the thick box on the table. I had the exit wound. Grant continued, his gaze locking onto mine. But I lacked the weapon. Until you triggered a security alert on the Seaglass server last night by downloading the signature comparison. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The anonymous tip I had received the night before. It wasn't a warning from a friend. It was a test from him. You sent me the file. I whispered. I needed to see if you would open it. Grant admitted. I needed to know if you were a co-conspirator or a casualty. When you ran a dead man switch protocol instead of deleting the evidence, I knew you were smart, and I knew you were innocent. Grant reached into the box and pulled out a stack of documents. He spread them on Paul's desk. They were bank transfers. Dozens of them. Ethan Hart did not seduce my wife because he loved her, Grant said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. And Marla did not sleep with him for passion. Look at the dates. Ms. Hart. I looked. The transfers to Ethan's LLC perfectly matched the dates of their romantic trips. They were using the affair as a cover. I said, the horror rising in my throat. Every time they met, it wasn't just sex. It was a data handoff. Precisely. Grant said, Marla stole my authentication tokens. Ethan provided the laundering vehicle through his family's connections. They were not just cheating on us. They were robbing us blind, and they were using your marriage and my marriage as the smokescreens. I felt sick. Ethan had not just betrayed me emotionally. He had turned me into a prop in a heist. I have the forensic accounting, Grant said, leaning forward. I have the motive, but I need the link. I need the communication logs you pulled from his device. I need the time-stamped video of them discussing the signature. I need the exit plan folder. Paul looked at me, then at Grant. And if she gives it to you, what does she get, besides a pat on the back? Grant looked at Paul for the first time, a faint, cold smile touching his lips. If she gives me the drive, Grant said, I will wrap her in so much legal armor that the Hart family will not be able to touch a hair on her head. I will handle the lawsuits. I will handle the security. And I will ensure that when the dust settles, she is the one standing, and they are the ones in handcuffs. He turned back to me. Tell me what happened at that dinner. Brianna, Grant said softly. Tell me everything. And I promise you, by the end of this week, Ethan Hart will wish he had never learned to sign his name. I am not here to save your marriage. Brianna, Grant said, his voice devoid of any comforting warmth. He sat back in the chair, watching me with the intensity of a hawk circling a field. I am here to end a war that I did not start but currently find myself losing. I intend to burn the battlefield so thoroughly that nothing grows back. I looked at him, then at Paul, who was reading the documents with a furrowed brow. Why should I trust you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You are the husband of the woman who destroyed my life. For all I know, you want to bury this scandal just as much as the Harts do to save your own reputation. I do not care about reputation, Grant replied smoothly. I care about liquidity, and I care about loyalty. As for why you should trust me, that is simple, because the most dangerous person in this story is not your husband. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the metal desk. Ethan is arrogant. Brianna, he is a narcissist with a taste for expensive toys, but he is not sophisticated. He does not know how to layer 3 distinct shell companies across 2 international jurisdictions to bypass SEC scrutiny. He is not smart enough to build the engine. He is just the driver. My stomach turned over. I thought about the files I had found, the complex routing numbers, the structured deposits. Grant was right. Ethan struggled to balance our household budget without software assistance. This level of financial engineering was beyond him. Who, I asked? We traced the IP address that established the original LLC framework. Grant said, It did not originate from your home. It originated from a private study in a property on Martha's Vineyard, a property owned by Marcus Hart. The name hit me like a slap. Uncle Marcus. Ethan's uncle. The family's eccentric financial advisor who always drank too much scotch at Christmas and bragged about how taxes were optional for people with vision. Marcus taught him. I realized the pieces clicking together with a terrifying precision. That is why Richard and Eleanor were so scared last night. It was not just about the shame of an affair. If this comes out, it does not just take down Ethan. It takes down the family architect. Exactly, Grant said. They were not protecting a cheating son. They were protecting the vault. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He placed it on the desk and pressed play. The audio was grainy, recorded in what sounded like a busy restaurant, but Marla's voice was unmistakable. Grant is getting suspicious, Marla's voice said through the speaker. If he looks too close, he will see the transfers. Ethan will take the fall if it blows up. Another voice replied. It was Marcus Hart. His voice was gravelly and amused. He is useful, Marla, but he is just a pawn. The Hart family accounts are the real destination. Once the funds wash through his little LLC, they disappear into our trust. You get your cut, we get ours, and Ethan gets to feel like a big man. Grant stopped the tape. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I had slept next to Ethan for 5 years. I had cooked dinner for Marcus. I had sat at their tables and listened to their lectures on tradition and honor. And the whole time, they were just a network of thieves in designer suits. They played him, I whispered, and they played me. They played us all, Grant corrected. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was heavy, legal-grade bond paper. This is a sworn affidavit, Grant explained. It states that you discovered evidence of wire fraud and identity theft on shared marital devices, and that you are turning this evidence over to my team and federal investigators voluntarily. It grants you immunity from prosecution as a whistleblower. But once you sign this, there is no going back. The civil suits will start within the hour. The criminal warrants will follow by the end of the week. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen Paul was holding out to me. I hesitated for 3 seconds. I was not hesitating because I was afraid of them anymore. I was hesitating because I knew that the moment ink touched this paper, The life I had built for the last decade would be officially dead. I would be the woman who destroyed a dynasty. "Do it," Paul said softly. I took the pen. I signed my name in clear, sharp strokes, Brianna Hart. I pushed the paper back to Grant. He picked it up, inspected the signature, and nodded. For the first time, the coldness in his eyes thawed just a fraction. "Good," Grant said. He signaled to his assistant, who immediately began typing on her tablet. "Now we move to the offensive. And now comes the part you did not expect." "What part?" I asked. Grant stood up and buttoned his jacket. "We are not just sending this to the authorities," he said. "We are going to deliver it to them in person. Tonight." The conference room on the top floor of the Seaport Hotel in Boston was a glass box of sterile, air-conditioned silence. Outside, the harbor was gray and choppy. Inside, the atmosphere was frozen. Grant sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 attorneys who looked like they cost more per hour than my father made in a year. I sat to his right, my hands clasped tightly on the polished wood, waiting for the door to open. When it finally did, Ethan walked in first. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he saved for board meetings and weddings, trying to project an image of unshakable confidence. But I knew him. I saw the tightness around his eyes and the way he checked his watch twice in 3 seconds. "Brianna," Ethan said, stopping at the other end of the table. He put on a smile that made my skin crawl. "Honey, look at you. You are letting these people get into your head. You are being manipulated by outsiders who do not understand our family." He was still trying to gaslight me. He was still trying to play the benevolent patriarch. Then Marla entered. If Ethan was trying to project strength, Marla was the picture of ruin. She walked in behind him, her eyes fixed on the floor. She looked like she had not slept in a week. Her skin was pale, and the dark circles under her eyes were visible even through layers of concealer. She did not look at me. More importantly, she did not dare look at Grant. She sat down as far away from him as possible, shrinking into her chair as if she hoped to disappear. Grant did not shout. He did not stand up. He simply pressed a button on the console in front of him, and the smart glass wall turned opaque, projecting a timeline of wire transfers. "I am not here to argue," Grant said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I am here to clarify." He looked at his wife. "Marla," Grant said. Marla flinched as if he had thrown a stone at her. "We have the transfers from the joint account to Seaglass Harbor," Grant continued. "We have the flight logs. We have the metadata from the signature templates. I have a very simple question for you. Do you want to tell the truth right now? Or do you want me to peel this back layer by layer until there is nothing left of you?" "This is ridiculous," Ethan interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. "You are using illegal recordings. Brianna violated my privacy. Anything she found is inadmissible because she hacked my personal devices." One of Grant's lawyers, a woman with eyes like flint, spoke up without looking up from her files. "Actually, Mr. Hart, the device in question was a shared family iPad with biometric access enabled for both parties. The terms of service on your cloud account explicitly state that all authorized users consent to data sharing. There was no hack. You simply left the digital door unlocked." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His legal defense had just evaporated. Grant slid a single piece of paper across the long table. It stopped directly in front of Ethan. "We found this in the draft folder," Grant said. I looked at the document. It was a power of attorney form, granting Ethan full control over the ocean view, trust my mother's trust. At the bottom was my signature, but I had never signed it. "You forged it," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You didn't just want me to sign it. You were tired of waiting, so you scanned my signature from our tax returns and pasted it on. That is a draft," Ethan stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "It was just a mock-up. I never filed it." "I know you didn't," I said. "Because you needed a witness." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's display system. I pressed play on the video I had found in the exit plan folder. On the screen, Ethan and Marla were sitting in my kitchen. Ethan was holding a pen, pointing at a document. "If the bank calls," the video. Ethan said, his voice clear and impatient. "You just tell them you were present when Brianna signed it. Say she was rushing to get to work. Say she is too scatterbrained to remember the specific date. But isn't that risky?" the video Marla asked. "It is only risky if we get caught." The video Ethan replied with a smirk. "And Brianna never checks the statements." The video ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan looked like he was going to vomit. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sheer terror of a man watching his own execution. Marla made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. "I didn't want to," Marla wailed, her voice high and hysterical. She looked up at Grant, tears streaming down her face, pleading. "Ethan said it was safe. I only did it because you were never there." "Grant, you were always working. You left me alone in that big house for months. I was lonely. I just wanted attention." She was trying to turn herself into the victim. She was trying to blame her husband for her own felonies. Grant looked at her. His expression did not change. There was no hurt in his eyes, only a cold, final detachment. "I was working to build the life you enjoyed spending," Grant said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a block. "I was building an empire while you were building a criminal conspiracy. So do not sit there and blame my absence for your greed." Grant opened the leather portfolio resting next to his hand. He did not pull out a weapon, but what he placed on the table was far more lethal to the Hart family than a gun. It was a thick, bound contract with a bank authorization seal stamped in red ink at the bottom. "This is an escrow agreement," Grant said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "It authorizes the immediate transfer of $100 million into a blind trust under your name. Brianna." The room went dead silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a roar in the vacuum of sound. Ethan shot up from his chair so fast it tipped over and crashed onto the floor. "What?" Ethan screamed, his voice cracking and shattering like glass. You cannot do that. That is insane. You are paying her for betraying me." Grant did not even look at Ethan. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "You helped me recover the assets they stole," Grant said to me, his tone clinical and precise. "This is your share. It is $100 million, and I want you to use it to grind them into dust in court." I looked at the contract. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the leverage sitting in front of me. Paul, my lawyer, leaned in and scanned the document rapidly. "It is not a gift." "Brianna," Paul whispered, his eyes widening. "This is a litigation financing structure combined with a civil restitution agreement. It is a war chest. It effectively prepays all legal fees, security costs, and living expenses for the next 20 years of litigation. It is completely legal, and it is untouchable." I picked up the pen. For years, the Harts had used money as a weapon to silence people. They had used their wealth to make me feel small, dependent, and trapped. Now, the tables had not just turned. They had been pulverized. I signed my name. The ink was dark and permanent. The money is only released for legal defense, forensic accounting, and personal security. Grant clarified, closing the folder. "But I imagine you will need a lot of security once the indictments drop." Ethan lost his mind. The reality that I was now more powerful than him and funded by the very man he tried to rob snapped something in his brain. "You bitch!" Ethan roared. He lunged across the conference table, his face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly violence. "I will kill you. You think you can take my money and walk away? I will wring your—" He never reached me. Grant's private security detail intercepted him mid-air, pinning him against the glass wall. "Let the record show," Paul said loudly to the room, "that Mr. Hart just issued a death threat in front of 3 officers of the court. We will be adding that to the emergency protective order." Before Ethan could struggle free, the double doors of the conference room opened again. This time, it was not lawyers who entered, it was 2 federal marshals and a detective from the Boston Police Department. They walked straight past Ethan and stopped in front of Marla. "Marla Calder," the detective said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny." Marla did not scream. She simply went limp. As the cold metal clicked around her wrists, the sound rang out like the final period at the end of a very long sentence. She looked at Grant one last time, her eyes pleading, but he was already packing his briefcase. He had already moved on. By noon that day, the dominoes fell with terrifying speed. The affidavit I signed gave the authorities probable cause to freeze the assets of the entire Hart family trust. The subpoenas arrived at the Newport estate while Eleanor was having tea. The reputation they had spent 3 generations polishing evaporated in a single afternoon news cycle. I walked out of the hotel and went straight to the courthouse with Paul. We filed the divorce papers citing adultery, fraud, and spousal abuse. I did not ask for alimony. I did not ask for their house. I did not want anything that had the Hart name on it. I signed the lease on a new apartment in a high-security building that evening, paid for by the trust. I stood on the steps of the courthouse as the sun began to set over the Boston skyline. I took a deep breath. The air tasted cold and clean. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I just let my shoulders drop for the first time in 5 years. Grant was right. The truth did not just set me free. It cut the throat of the system that tried to bury me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and resilience. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are tuning in from today. I love reading your thoughts and seeing how far our community reaches. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.